government lawyer, and he went and spent 30 hours talking to Mueller and his team.
And the president doesn't like it. And the bottom line is Don McGahn understands the severity of this. He understands that if you are asked to come, and even if the president says there's executive privilege, this is a very serious investigation. And I've been told by those lawyers for some parties involved in this that, you know, this deals with, a lot of this is focusing in on that June 9th meeting. And it deals with the elections issues. This is very serious. This is not about the court of public opinion. This is about the rule of law. And that's what Don McGahn understands, even though the president doesn't like it. And he gave those 30-plus hours, from what we're hearing, for a reason. For a reason.
And the reason, presumably, being, among other things, that he was concerned about his own legal stance in all of this. He wanted to show that he had nothing to hide and he was willing to cooperate.
Yeah, that's actually quite stunning, the conflict that he felt. And there's really a question there as to whether that should have been something that would give rise to his own resignation or disclosure of what was happening. Now, what's important to keep in mind here is that government lawyers aren't like private lawyers. Private lawyers have a duty to represent their client zealously. There's an attorney-client privilege. For government lawyers, there's a broader objective of serving the public interest. And the court has been, various courts have been really clear, even when it comes to privilege claims. If there is no government interest in withholding information that is relevant to a criminal investigation. So McGahn is in a difficult situation that's made even more complicated by this particular president, who tends to, as was mentioned, take the rule of law and just shred it, throw it up in the air and see where things land. And we're a bit flummoxed all across the board as to how to sort all these legal issues out because the president doesn't respect the law.
Seth is going to sort it all out for us right now. How do you see it?
Piece of cake. Well, listen, I think that this is a legal team that has a strict duty to throw strikes, but they have just many unforced errors here. Just looking for...
Are you talking about the White House legal team or the private Trump legal team?
The private Trump legal team led, among others, by Rudy Giuliani. I think Mr. Giuliani is putting his client in significant legal peril. If you take a look at what's going on right now, there are a lot of unforced errors. Just let's focus on the situation with Don McGahn. There could be arguments either way as to whether or not the president wanted to waive privilege or whether he could or should. But at the end of the day, that's not necessarily a bad strategy. What is utterly shocking is that when you waive privilege and then you find out that Don McGahn has been speaking with the special counsel's office for 30 hours and you're learning about it when you're reading it in the New York Times, that's absolutely shocking. And now we're hearing that they think that they can still claim executive privilege when I can tell you that they absolutely cannot. The case law on this is clear. Once waived, it's waived permanently. You know that Don McGahn did not speak for 30 hours in a block. It had to be broken out in days. Every single day, the president's lawyers needed to be sitting down with either McGahn or at least his attorney trying to figure out what in the world is going on. There's a lot of misdirection going on, and the president is in significant legal peril.
And well, part of this problem is that Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal attorney now, is doing a lot of these things without the White House knowing what's happening. And Don McGahn is trying to save himself. Rudy Giuliani is running, he's the wild card. You don't know what to expect in the White House. And I've said this before, Sarah Huckabee Sanders got upset. They're caught brats. They're just not knowing what's going on with what Rudy Giuliani is doing.
Rudy Giuliani is saying that he's worried that the president's going to make inconsistent statements. That's exactly what Rudy Giuliani is doing.
Yeah.
He's changing the story about Trump Tower. He's changing the story about whether there was collusion. And even if there is, it's not encapsulated in the federal code, which is technically incorrect. So a lot of misdirection, a lot of unforced errors here.
Yeah, and Giuliani goes on television and he doesn't even know a lot of the facts involving that Trump Tower meeting in June of 2016 when the Russians were pitching an idea to help the president get dirt on Hillary Clinton, and they made it clear in the email exchanges, the text messages they were sending with Donald Trump Jr., this was coming from the Russian government.
Yeah, I mean, Rudy Giuliani is shooting from the hip like his client. I don't think he's actually functioning as an attorney, as was mentioned. In a traditional sense, McGahn is at least trying to adhere to his ethical obligations. And I think this misinformation, this notion that facts aren't facts, that we can shift our story and it all depends on whoever's speaking, undermines our entire civil and criminal justice system.
Sure does.
And where rules of evidence, both at the federal level and state level, that that are designed for decades, if not centuries, to make sure that the information that goes before the juries is accurate and supported by facts. So what Giuliani is doing is not just, I think, undermines the interests of his client, but it undermines the interests of the American people and the rule of law and the criminal and civil justice system.
Let me play a clip from Giuliani yesterday talking about the Trump Tower meeting. Listen to this.
All they knew is that a woman with a Russian name wanted to meet with them. They didn't know she was a representative of the Russian government. And indeed, she's not a representative of the Russian government.
Well, she was a representative of the Russian government, Natalia Veselnitskaya, because in the email exchange that Donald Trump Jr. had with Rob Goldstone, who was setting up this meeting with the Russians, the intermediary, it says clearly this is obviously very high level and sensitive information, but as part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump, helped along by Eris and Emin. Those were the individuals, the intermediaries, but clearly this was a meeting that was designed to provide information. They didn't get it necessarily from the Russian government to the Trump team.
What the problem is that Rudy Giuliani is doing, he is out here giving what he wants to give, and he understands. He's trying to play this in the court of public opinion. He clearly understands that whatever he puts out there, the Trump base is listening. They're trying to play this in the court of public opinion. The president's approval rating on Russia when it comes to his base is so high, and he's giving wrong information. Again, this is about the rule of law. And with that June 9th meeting, you could have President Trump, you could have, and this is what I'm hearing, possibly as an unindicted co-conspirator. You could have other Trump names come out. You could also have issues of conspiracy, elections issues. I mean, there's so much that comes just out of the June 9th meeting. This is serious. I cannot stress how serious this meeting is.
He doesn't know the facts of his own case. He doesn't know the law of his own case. He's completely silent as to the security clearance revocation issues, which I know is really kind of on a different strand, but I think that's relevant because it is illegal to attack people who are participating in the conducting of a lawful federal investigation. And in order to do that, if he's going to be interfering in that, it's not a good look as far as obstruction is concerned.
All right, Seth, Kim, and April, guys, thank you very much. Up next, there are new signs. Prosecutors may be closing in to charge President Trump's former fixer and lawyer, Michael Cohen. What this means potentially for the president. Plus, former President Jimmy Carter with a blistering rebuke of the current president, calling him, I'm quoting Jimmy Carter now, a disaster. And a jury is deciding the fate of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Looking at live pictures coming in from outside. 75 former U.S. officials have added their names to a letter denouncing President Trump for revoking Brennan's security clearance. They join more than a dozen former intelligence officials and 60 former CIA officials who put out similar statements last week. Brennan is promising a court fight if necessary.
I have been contacted by a number of lawyers, and they have already given me their thoughts about the basis for a complaint, an injunction, to try to prevent him from doing this in the future. If my clearances and my reputation, as I'm being pulled through the mud now, if that's the price we're going to pay to prevent Donald Trump from doing this against other people, to me it's a small price to pay. So I am going to do whatever I can personally to try to prevent these abuses in the future. And if it means going to court, I will do that.
President Trump shot back on Twitter today, daring him to file a lawsuit, calling him a, quote, political hack, and saying intelligence community critics are only concerned with losing the money and the prestige they have that a security clearance brings. Let's bring in Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu. He's from California. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs and Judiciary Committees. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. So is the president going through what his critics are describing as an enemies list, trying to inflict whatever damage he can?
Thank you, Wolf, for your question. That's absolutely correct. And I think it's important to understand that just because a president has the power to take an action doesn't mean it's legitimate. So, for example, if someone were to bribe the president and say, I'm going to give you $10,000 in exchange to get a security clearance, and the president agreed, that would not be legitimate. So similarly, if the president's revoking John Brennan's security clearance because of free speech issues, that is also not legitimate. And I think John Brennan would have a very reasonable and probably victorious First Amendment case if he were to bring it.
Did Brennan go too far in describing the president's behavior as, and he threw out the word treasonous?
I think different people can look at what the president did in Helsinki, the way he kowtowed to Vladimir Putin, and come away with that conclusion. I'm not sure that I would have gone to that length, but I think John Brennan is something within the reasonableness orbit to have made that conclusion. And people can also look at the Trump Tower meeting and reasonably conclude that that was collusion.
Collusion is different than treason.
Yes, it absolutely is. And by the way, Donald Trump today tweeted that there's no crime as collusion. That's true. It's just called conspiracy in legal terms. But yes, treason is a strong word. I agree with that.
All right. There was, as you know, the weekend reporting that the White House counsel, Don McGahn, he has been cooperating extensively with Robert Mueller's Russia probe. The president says he encouraged that kind of cooperation, but it's unclear what McGahn said. Is this McGahn trying to protect himself legally down the road? He's the White House counsel. He's not the president's personal attorney.
Right. There was one thing Don McGahn had to do before he could take office. He had to take an oath. And that was not an oath to Donald Trump or to any political party. It was an oath to the U.S. Constitution. So ultimately, Don McGahn's client is the Constitution and the rule of law. That's what he was doing when he was cooperating with the special counsel's office. And I think Don McGahn absolutely did the right thing.
As you know, the president was doing some spin control on McGahn's 30 hours of Q&A with the Mueller team, refuting any suggestion that McGahn is, in the president's words, a John Dean-style rat. John Dean, of course, was the Nixon administration's, the White House counsel during the Nixon administration, a whistleblower. Is his decision to drag John Dean into this a warning to McGahn?
I thought it was very telling that Donald Trump used the word rat in his tweet. An innocent person would not view a cooperating witness as a rat, but a criminal mind would. As a former prosecutor, I've dealt with lots of different criminals. This is how criminals think. They think anyone who cooperates with law enforcement is a rat and is somehow going to rat them out. And again, this is another statement that is inconsistent with the actions of an actually innocent person.
Since Don McGahn is a White House counsel, not the president's personal attorney like Rudy Giuliani, did he have any choice in testifying, in agreeing to Q&A with the Robert Mueller team?
I think ultimately, if Robert Mueller had subpoenaed him, he would have had to do so. But according to Donald Trump himself, he gave Don McGahn the permission to go do these interviews. So now the president appears to regret it. And again, if you're actually innocent, you wouldn't regret Don McGahn doing this. You would have nothing to hide. But it looks very much that Donald Trump has a lot to hide from the American people.